So if you'll turn to Psalm 18, we're going to start by go ahead and reading the psalm, and then we'll start making our comments and thoughts. This is our second week of looking at it, and I'm pretty sure we'll finish tonight. I want to finish it. All right, Psalm 18, beginning of verse 1. I love you, O Jehovah, my strength. Jehovah is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God and my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon Jehovah, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompass me, the torrents of destruction assail me, the cords of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon Jehovah, to my God I cried for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked, because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils, and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, thick clouds dark as water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. Jehovah also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. And he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he flashed forth lightnings and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, the foundations of the earth were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Jehovah, the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent from on high. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me. For they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but Jehovah was my support. He brought me into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. Jehovah dealt with me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he rewarded me. For I have kept the ways of Jehovah and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his rules were before me, and his statutes I did not put away from me. I was blameless before him, and I kept myself from my guilt. So Jehovah has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. With the merciful you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man you show yourself blameless. With the purified you show yourself pure. And with the crooked you make yourself seem torturous. For you save a humble people, but the haughty eyes you bring down. For it is you who light my lamp. Jehovah my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of Jehovah proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. For who is God but Jehovah? And who is a rock except our God? The God who equipped me with strength and made my way blameless. He made my feet like the feet of a deer, and he set me secure on the heights. He trains my hands for war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supported me, and your gentleness made me great. You gave a wide place for my steps under me, and my feet did not slip. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. I did not turn back till they were consumed. I thrust them through so that they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet. For you equipped me with strength for the battle. You made those who rise against me sink under me. You made my enemies turn their backs to me, and those who hated me I destroyed. They cried for help, but there was none to save. They cried to Jehovah, but he did not answer. I beat them fine as dust before the wind. I cast them out like the mire of the streets. You delivered me from strife with the people. You made me the head of the nations. People whom I had not known served me. As soon as they heard me, they obeyed me. Foreigners came cringing to me. Foreigners lost heart and came trembling out of their fortresses. Jehovah lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. The God who gave me vengeance and subdued peoples under me, who delivered me from my enemies. Yes, you exalt me above those who rose against me. You rescued me from the man of violence. For this I will praise you, O Jehovah, among the nations, and sing to your name. Great salvation he brings to his king, and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David, and his offspring forever. Okay, so as we've talked about in the previous classes, this psalm is also included at the end of the life of David in First Chronicles. And it has essentially the same words there that we read in the introduction to this, that these are the words of David when Jehovah rescued him from all of his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And it's hard to tell exactly when this was written, but obviously it's recorded for us at the end of David's life, and is a kind of a summary, I think, of the things that he went through. Although some people see this as being, David said this maybe at the time when he became king after the death of Saul. But, can't tell. So we don't know exactly the time, but since the scriptures put it at the end of his life, I tend to think of it in that place also. And so when we read about in this passage the vengeance and the war and the bloodshed and the things like that, it's not surprising. David is having to cope with enemies who are against him, who are seeking to kill him, and he's describing to us how Jehovah is the one who saved him through that. So there's some very violent imagery in this psalm. He describes this as, well, I describe this as a love letter because of how he starts. I love you, O Jehovah, my strength. So the psalm is going to be a description. Why is it that David loves his God? What is it that God has done that makes it so that he loves him? So you guys know that I love to mess with pictures for these psalms, and this is too small, I know, for you guys to see. I struggled with this. Jean is saying, no, it's not too hard, but she's got good young eyes. So this is essentially my depiction of the first couple of sections that we've already looked at. And so I'll use it to review and maybe set this up. And essentially I see the psalm being divided into 4 areas where David looks at what God has done for him in order to provide his salvation. So the psalm begins with David declaring that Jehovah is my strength, my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my refuge, my shield, the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. So this begins powerfully for telling us who God is and why God is able to help David the way that he helps him. And in particular, he says, this is the first 3 verses, when I called to Jehovah, he saved me from my enemies. And I think it also says in there that he is worthy to be praised. And I probably need to put that on there. But so that describes the essence of the situation that he's going to be looking at. When I'm in trouble, I call to God, he takes care of things for me. And that's why, in essence, why he loves him. So the first one that we looked at last week is where David describes himself, and this is kind of a section on David, where he is describing himself as being close to death in verses 4 and 5, where he says the net of the cords of death are surrounding me. And we noted that over in verse 16, he drew me out of many waters. So the allusion in this passage, and I understand it's allusion, that he's overwhelmed, he's being flooded. So it's like he's being drowned. And the essence of the problem, of course, is that he has this group of enemies who are attacking him, who he describes as strong, they hate him, and they're too mighty for him. So he feels overwhelmed by that and describes it as distress and calamity. So he cries out for help. Jehovah hears him from heaven, and his response is God is angry and he rebukes them. And so we looked mostly last week at the theophany, the section where it describes God coming in the storm as both this picture was supposed to be an earthquake, and then God coming in the storm. And because God comes in that way, then the enemies are scattered and routed. And so that's God's response against the enemies. But he also has a response for David, which is that he rescues him. He takes him out of the water and lifts him up, it says, on a broad place, which the idea is a place of freedom, of security. So it's a great contrast to being overwhelmed and drowning in the water. And so he describes Jehovah as my support, and that he says, for he delighted in me. And the next section then is where he describes why God delights in him. And he lists his character. Because of my righteousness and cleanness, I kept the way, I'm blameless. His rules are ever before me, I kept myself from guilt, and I'm humble. And most of us would refrain from talking to God in our prayers and saying, God, I'm righteous, you delight in me because I'm such a good guy, wouldn't we? But David's giving us that example that he's saying, this is who I am. And because of who I am, and because of who God is, he rewarded me. And that's kind of where we stopped. We didn't get into the merciful, the blameless, and the purified in the next section. So that's where we want to look at beginning in verse 25. I don't think we looked at this. So if we did, let me know. In verse 25, where he says, with the merciful you show yourself merciful, with the blameless man you show yourself blameless, with the purified you show yourself pure, and with the crooked you make yourself seem torturous. Did we talk about this last week? Okay, because especially that last part where David describes God as torturous is concerning. That's something we're probably uncomfortable with thinking about. So this first part then, verses 25 and where God is God's actions toward us are a reflection of both who he is and who he wants us to be. So if we're merciful, God is merciful. We know that, don't we? We're familiar with what Jesus said. Blessed are those who are merciful, for right, exactly. They'll obtain mercy. So we know that. God is blameless. And blameless, David obviously in this passage is blameless doesn't mean without sin. Well, it doesn't mean perfect. But rather, as we discussed, it's God who makes him blameless. That's why he says in this psalm that he's blameless, but he says it's God who made him blameless. We did talk about that last week. So we have with that idea, looking at the wrong part of my notes, that God is faithful to us. That when we reflect his character, he's going to do us right. If you're purified, you show yourself pure. The part that concerns me is where he says, with the crooked, and verse 27 also gives us the haughty-eyed people. How does God show himself? If you're crooked, he's going to be torturous. But if you want to, go ahead, Earl.
First off, he says, you make yourself seem torturous.
Okay.
He doesn't say, I am torturous.
Right.
It's quite a difference.
It is a difference, and it's significant, isn't it? That he would say it that way. Marlon?
The New King James says, with the devious you will show yourself shrewd.
Shrewd, exactly. And that's, other translations use the word astute. So the idea is that he set up a pattern here. If I'm merciful, God will be merciful to me. If I'm blameless, God will be just towards me. If I'm pure, he will be pure. If I'm crooked, then how does God treat me? Crookedly? Twisted in the sense that he does what he's not going to do things that help you. Right? He's going to deal with you wisely. But he's not going to give into your things. The word even has the idea to wrestle. So if you're crooked, God's going to wrestle you. It's the same word that's used when Jacob actually wrestled with the angel of Jehovah on that one time. So his character doesn't change, of course. But with those who don't follow his ways, they find God inscrutable. They don't understand. how he works. And so there are some of these enemies who are attacking David, who think that God should be on their side, that God should be helping them. Would that be true of Saul? You don't think Saul thought God should be on his side?
Oh, I misunderstood your question.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm good, I'm glad.
Saying that Saul
Okay. Did Saul think God should be on his side? Why? He was king. He was anointed, right? Julian?
Well, Saul also seemed to believe that he was still on God's side the whole time.
Exactly. And really, he wanted God to be on his side without him being on God's side. Yes.
Because Saul doesn't inquire of God.
Right.
He doesn't. He decides, look, if I got to talk to God, give me a chance. On your team.
Well, and then even when he's told what to do, he doesn't obey what God says. And when he's chasing David in order to kill him, his expectation is that God is on his side. He gets very frustrated that David is constantly escaping him. And I keep going back to that picture that we have of Saul just a step away from David, and just at that time, the Philistine army invades, and Saul actually goes to fight them, which he had avoided in other cases, but in that case he did. So, and I think to me, that's a great example of how with the crooked you make yourself astute. God was frustrating Saul's plans. And Saul could not accomplish what he thought he should. Walter, and then Brian. Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Brian.
Well, I was going to ask you if you think that, do you think David is any point on, I'm sorry, what Saul would have changed if you think God changed his heart for that reason? Because we know twice that Saul's heart was changed. And I wonder if maybe that changing of the heart could have been part of that, what you were just describing God, basically turned away from Saul.
I think, in my mind, in thinking about the life of Saul, it's clear to me that Saul turned away from God. And therefore, God treated him accordingly.
Well, God was upset. He was ashamed he made Saul king.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that depended upon what Saul's condition was. And I think that, to me, that fits beautifully with what David has been actually saying in this psalm. David said, I've shown myself to be righteous, clean, I've kept your way, I'm blameless, I've kept myself from guilt, I've been humble. And because I've been those things, you've rewarded me. But to the crooked, and this is what it gets down to the crooked, the haughty, his way is torturous, and he brings them down. But the haughty eyes, verse 27, but the haughty eyes you bring down. I have a hard time not seeing that very specifically talking about Saul, don't you? Was Saul brought down by God? Was it because of his arrogance? Exactly, and I think those two are related also, don't you? The arrogance and the disobedience. So we have this picture then of God delivering David. So what's the answer to the question in this case? Why does David love God? Now, the first example, it's taken us 3 weeks, but the third week. Why does he love him? Okay, God loves David, and look at what God has done for him. Yes, sir.
God is not only taking care of David, but he's taking care of David's problems, which made life for him quite miserable for a long time. But those things have gone away now. God is the one who did that.
And he sees God as being just and faithful in all the things that he's doing. So David has described himself as essentially, I'm practically dead. God saved me. We see that kind of attitude all the time. If someone saves another person, The tendency is to be grateful, deeply grateful. Multiple.
And he saved him in a way in which David was not, could not be criticized or disliked by people, especially in devotion, not Judah. So that he became king, they united.
That's a great point. Yes. Okay, so the next example that he uses, and we'll be using the slideshow a little bit more here, it's a little bit harder to see. But you'll notice that beginning in verse 28, says, For it is you who light my lamps, Jehovah my God lightens my darkness. So now the picture that we get is of David facing some kind of darkness, and the enemies are against him, and they're against him as because of war. Where is it? Okay, so a few verses down, he mentions verse 34. He trains my hands for war. So now David is using, instead of the idea of being overwhelmed in water, of being trapped in darkness. Have you ever been trapped in darkness? For a long period of time. Does it get panicky? Is it easy to get panicky? For most people, it is. When you can't see, and I don't know where to step, I don't know where to move, we lose orientation and things like that. It's very, very difficult when we're in that darkness. And so David is saying here, this war of my enemies against me, it's like I'm like I'm in darkness. Yes.
This darkness doesn't necessarily mean no light. It means a darkness of trouble about him, something like that.
Again, yes, it's the metaphor, just like the waves overwhelming him. Now he's trapped in the darkness where he's not sure what to do. So, what's the solution for darkness? And that's exactly what we're going to see here. So in this section, though, verses 31, how does he describe God? But who is God but Jehovah? And who is a rock except our God? So, what is it that God does for him in this situation? Well, he's going to give him the light that he needs. Where he says, it is you who light my lamp and lightens my darkness. Yes.
Well, throughout our studies about it, we have seen what happened when he went to God and asked God, what should I do? Everything worked out great. What happened when David made up his own mind and said, I'm going to do this. It's the best thing for me to do. Things didn't go good. So God led him in the right way, and that gave him the light.
I think that's it. I'm going to call that the self-imposed darkness. Where he said, I'm going to, the only thing that's best for me.
Yeah.
And he wanders to the Philistines and ends up in all kinds of trouble. Yeah. Yeah.
If we want a good description of darkness, we have to turn to 1 John chapter 1. And there, the light of God explains the difference
Between the light and the dark. But in that case, I just want to make this distinction. Darkness in that case is being used as a metaphor for sin, whereas David's not in sin. When David's speaking of the darkness that he's in here, I think it's because of the war of his enemies. And so I do think that the analogy is a different analogy. Now, on the other hand, when we make application of this, often our darkness is the darkness of sin, and the solution still is Jesus, who is the light of the world, right? So I think that's vital for us to understand. Thoughts? Okay, so he says, it describes the light. Verse 30, this God, his way is perfect. Now, why is that significant when it's talking about light? Right. It's clear, right? This is clearly the way to go, and the word of Jehovah proves to be true. It's reliable. It's right there. So He's a shield for all those who take refuge in him. I'll add the shield in a little bit later. So then, beginning in verse 32, he begins to describe how God has equipped him for these things. And so, God equipped me with strength, and I'm blameless, and He's made me secure. Again, this goes back to that high rock, that broad place. He trains my hands for battle. So where does David get his prowess for war? From God, and he recognizes that. That's important. He supports me with his right hand. What is the significance of that? Okay, power. Right hand implies favor, the favor that he has from God. But think of yourself in darkness. If you're in darkness and you're confused and you don't know which way to go, does it help to have the light of the world on your side, and he supports you? Powerful imagery, isn't it? Okay. I love the next one, and again, this is one of those things. And your gentleness, this is the end of verse 35, and your gentleness made me great. God's gentleness made me great. The word is gentleness here, some translations use meekness. The NIV said it this way: you stooped down to make me great. And I think they captured the idea here. Where is God? He's described it earlier in the previous section. When Jehovah heard him, he heard him from heaven, right, from his temple. And so now he's saying, you make me great because you stooped down. So God has come down to help him. And that fits with the picture of the storm and all the things that go along with that from the previous image. God has actually come down to help David. Does that make sense to you? What's the ultimate example of God stooping down to help us, to make us great? Exactly. Jesus is the example of the one who came as a servant. He chose to leave heaven, become a man, put on a human body, and die for us. And so it shouldn't surprise us that a passage like this, where God says, where David says of God, you've stooped down to make me great. Through your meekness or your gentleness. I guess I'd really like to stoop down. It makes it more clear. Did you have a thought, Dan?
And he did his father's will, not his own.
Exactly, and that's the part of it. Did you have something, Ryan, or Paul? Okay.
Verse 5, so gentleness, but in the alternate translation says condescension.
Okay. Well, and that condensate, the same thing. That he comes down in order to help us. Exactly. Now, God's gentleness to David, how do we contrast that with how he's treating the enemies? Okay. Torturous, he's routing them, scattering them with his lightning. He is destroying the enemies that are there. So we have a great contrast with that David's showing us in this passage about how God is treating him. And so in verse 36, gave me a white place for my steps under me, and my feet do not slip. I can't remember. Oh, put me in the white place. So again, that's the security that we see in the other passage. Okay, any thoughts? Yes, Brian.
Verse 36, I really like the way that it's written here in the King James. Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, that my feet did not slip. It's almost like he's walking on air in that sense. He's got a great amount of pride and courage in his step.
Right. And the key to that is the contrast with the darkness. When you're in complete dark, how do you walk? It's little steps and feeling and things like that. And the contrast is this: God has lifted me up and made me great. I'm walking confidently. That's a great point, Brian. Thank you for bringing that out. And so in verse 37, what does he do to the enemies? Oh, I was missing the next part. The bow. We kind of skipped over this. He trains my hands for war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. Are you guys archers? What's it like to bend a bow? Is it easy? It takes some strength. Even with a compound bow, it takes a little bit to get going. Can you imagine a bow of bronze where you have to bend it enough that that takes a lot of strength, right? So he's saying God has made me strong, and we also see he's giving me here the shield of salvation, right?
I think it's also important to remember that although David's hands are trained for war here, he also was able to play a harp so well that he could see demons.
Okay, that's a good point. That God didn't train him just for war. I like that. That's a good point. I'll correct that now.
One tip with that David was to say that, here he could kill tens of thousands.
Okay.
Play a harp.
Right, exactly. True.
What do you think the great things in the Bible life today is much more beautiful to be a Christian than just fighting for God?
Okay. And different ways of fighting for God. Even when he was playing the harp for Saul, he was calming his spirit. That was a way of fighting for God. So yeah, that's a good thing. So what he's able to do for that, because he's got all this equipped, I'm strong, I'm blameless, I'm secure, I'm trained, I'm supported, I've got the bow of bronze. What can he do to the enemies? Beginning of verse 37. I what?
Pursued them and overtook them.
Pursue them, I overtake them, and
He didn't stop until
okay, so he kept going until the threat was gone. Does that trouble anybody? Okay.
if the threat is gone, you're at peace.
Okay. Yeah. And these are the enemies, I don't think I put it on here, but these are the enemies that it says in verse 40 who hated me. Those who hated me, I destroyed. And that's another part of what happened. It describes them as that they fell. Where did that go? Thank you. They fell under my feet, and they sunk. They turned their backs, which means they were routed again, right? When you turn your backs, you're running away. And so he completely destroys them.
You were asking me if it bothers us that he utterly destroyed it. And just think what God told Saul to do with the Amalekites. Utterly destroyed it.
Right.
He didn't, and therefore his kingdom is taken from him because he didn't do what God said, and he would not admit it was his fault for doing it.
Great point. And the key there is this was not about this was about punishing the Amalekites for their wickedness.
Right.
So it wasn't God just being capricious in any sense. Exactly. So in verse 42, he goes on with how he dealt with them. I beat them fine as dust before the wind, which again, that's the idea, completely destroyed. And I cast them out like the mire in the streets. So it's something you throw away from you like refuse, like I said, back in those days. So you give it away from you. So God has equipped David to do this. He has the strength in order to do this and to save himself. But even though he's the one at war, where did he get the strength for doing this? From Jehovah, and he knows it. And don't you think that's key to understanding?
And God showed his way with that light.
Right, exactly. Now, what were the enemies doing? You see that verse 41. What did they do? They cried for help. Did you get that one there? Okay. They cried for help, and what kind of response did they get from God?
No.
Yeah, there's no one to answer, and there's no one to save. None to save. God doesn't answer them. Why doesn't God answer the enemies?
They have not been proved just to God, so he has not answered.
Okay. And this is the contrast that we're reading. I call to him, and he saves me from my enemies. But my enemies who are opposed to me and therefore opposed to God, as he stated, when they cry out for help, no answer. Okay? So it's not that he didn't hear their cry for help. It's that he's not going to help these people who are the enemies of his kingdom and his anointing. Other thoughts?
Not only that, but there's no one to help them. Not God, not another enemy of Israel. No one.
Okay. No support.
No support whatsoever.
Okay, that's a good point. There was none to save him, not just God. Anyone. Walter.
And Israel and also Judah were disobedient to God, and eventually God brought judgment on them. He used the nation of the warriors to bring that judgment upon them. And then when they were disobedient to God, He brought another warriors against them and defeated them. So it's not God's way of executing things. And when Israel and Judah were being taken into captivity, they cried for him. But God said He was going to receive this as God. I promise you what will happen to you.
So, the next section. We have David again talking about, in verse 43, you delivered me from the strife of the people. Now we actually get the names of the enemies in this case. In this section, the enemies are named as the people. Verse 43 is also the nations. And in verse 44, foreigners. So I don't know, if he's naming three different groups or this is all one group. But I also get the feeling that it's at least two, because the people would be like Saul, who is people of his own nation. And then foreigners would be like the Philistines. So I think we have, and that's essentially who fought at that time. So I think that's what he's dealing with, is he's speaking of it as the strife that came from dealing with Saul and with the nations of Philistines. And as they create this strife, what kind of strife did they create for David? What kind of strife did Saul create for David? Let's start there.
But he pursued David for a very long time, trying to catch him and kill him because he didn't want David to take the kingdom from him.
And when David did try to make things right repeatedly, Saul would change for a moment, but then he would swing right back into the pursuit, and it always seemed to get worse with each one. So that was part of that strife, and I think that really wore on David. It was very difficult for him. How did he have strife with the other nations, the Philistines?
Well, let's back up and talk about his own family. Strife within his own family.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that, yeah.
Absalom tried to took the kingdom away from him, and then once again David had to flee.
Right, yeah, exactly. Good point. Okay, and the Philistines? Did he have peace when he lived among the Philistines? I remember even the first time that he went to try to live with them, he had to pretend crazy to get out alive, or he thought he did. And the second time, he spent a lot of time lying, right, in order to make it look like he was loyal to them. But they were constantly against him, and they were constantly afraid. So the picture that we have here is that David is struggling with these people, and he says, Jehovah delivered me. We shouldn't be surprised. This is the pattern that he set up in this psalm. He's showing that God delivered him from his enemies. And what's amazing is that when he delivers them, let's look at what it says of them. Verse 44 and 45. Foreigners came cringing to me, lost heart, and came trembling out of their fortresses. So when David is king, how does God change the heart of the foreigners? terrified. They come to David and seek peace in some way. They're terrified. In fact, what God says is, God has made me the head over them. He made me the head of the nations. Which once he was king over all of them, that was part of his plan. Is that he took over the Philistines and the Edomites and the Moabites. He accomplished what God had always intended to accomplish through Joshua, of gaining the whole land. David did that. These people whom I had not known, they served me and they obeyed me. So what God accomplished, I went too far, sorry. They made me head, they served me, they obeyed me. He turned the people around. Not necessarily that they loved him at that point, but those who were enemies looked to him. Yes?
It was like they didn't have a choice. They had to go to him. But, typically we would think that we would see something on like a flood or a famine, a plague of some sort to bring people to the king. But it sounds like they go to him for refuge.
Because
Food, help, whatever they need.
Also talking about the foreign nations that gave materials for the temple.
you mean like the king of Tyre. Yeah. It does say, I think Dan found it somewhere that it said that he loved, it was Hiram, right? Hiram, king of Tyre, loved David. It doesn't say when that relationship got going good, but it may be that, David was kind to him because he gave all the gifts and things like that. But it's interesting that he was willing to give enough to build a house for David, a palace for him to live in. Okay, the next section starting in verse 46. Don't you just love how it starts? Jehovah lives. Now, that's powerful in and of itself, isn't it? Most of these other, especially foreigners, what kind of gods did they worship? Idols. How has David shown that Jehovah lives in this psalm? He does things.
And the idols do nothing but stand there.
Okay, he's active. The idols can't do anything. We see that emphasized in other, prophecies later in Isaiah and Jeremiah. But Jehovah lives, and he has lived and taken care of David. Did you have something, Paul?
Mentioned that in the last of the week before, that when God was taking care of David's enemies, he was not being subtle about it. It was blatantly obvious that this wasn't David's doing, this was God's doing, and he is powerful.
Exactly so. And so he is described then as my rock and exalted. Blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. I need that on my picture also. Because David is praising God at this point, right? And he's saying he is incredibly powerful. So this feels like part of the summary to me. And the reason he says that is because this is the God who gave me vengeance. And vengeance against, as he describes it later, down in verse 48, those who rose against me, you rescued me from the man of violence. As Paul brought up at one point, a lot of people see Absalom as that man of violence. I see Saul very clearly as that man of violence, although some people don't think he could throw a javelin very well. Goliath was a man of violence. So it may be, a much bigger picture than one specific person. And it's just the idea that people rose up against me, they hate me, and yet God took care of it. And he gave me vengeance.
That makes it sound like David's the one that's doing his victory even, whereas it says in New King James, God who avenges me, instead of getting vengeance.
Okay. So, and I think this is part of the interesting dynamic to me of this psalm, isn't it? How was David able, when he was overwhelmed by his enemies? God came as the storm that scattered, but there wasn't an actual storm. David wasn't actually in a flood. It was what he did. In the second instance, it was out in the darkness, but who went out and fought the enemy? It was David. So he knows God has given him the strength to do what was right. So in this vengeance that we have to be so careful of, we have to remember the section over here where he said, I'm righteous, clean, I kept the way, I'm blameless, I kept your rule before me, I kept myself from guilt, and I've been humble. David has asserted his blamelessness before God, even in the vengeance, because he is responding against those who have attacked him. Think about for a moment, how did David get vengeance against Saul? Because we know the psalm is about Saul. What did David do? When David saw him in that cave when he was by himself without his guards, what did David do? And then felt incredibly guilty that he had done that, right? And he snuck in the camp one night and took Saul's spear in his canteen and challenged Saul. Look what I could have done. When we say David got his vengeance, was it because he was hateful? Exactly. The opposite, really. He respected God, and God helped him to take care of these things in the right way. Even when David heard the news that Saul had been killed, how did he react?
He killed the messenger.
He killed the messenger, and he mourned what had happened. He didn't rejoice. He mourned what had happened because of who Saul was. So I think we need to be careful. God who gave me vengeance doesn't imply here that David was rejoicing in these horrible things that happened. He understands that this was a situation of justice, and God was dealing with it correctly. So he goes on in that passage. You subdued the peoples over me, you delivered me from my enemies, you exalted me, and you rescued me. So delivered, exalted, and rescued. And then what is his response? Verse 49 and 50. And this response that we're putting here at the very end probably belongs in another section as I was thinking about it later. But because I think it fits as a closing part of the song. For this, what is the for this? Is it just this situation? Yeah, exactly. It's the whole thing. I'm going to praise you. Who? Where? O Jehovah, among the nations. Not just among the people, but among the nations. Paul quotes this passage in Romans 15, verse 9, and uses it to show that God's acceptance of the nations. I'm going to praise you, and I'm going to sing to your name. Praise and sing. And why is he going to do that? What has God done for him? Great salvation and steadfast love. He's shown the great salvation. What does steadfast love mean? You tired of me asking this question? Covenanted relationship. They made an agreement, not just because they have to keep the agreement, but they have this, I will be your God, you will be my people. And God loves to keep it. God is faithful to that. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. And the emphasis is, this is with great salvation and steadfast love to his king, to the one who's been anointed. Now to me, this is why it fits with the end of David's life. Because I think David is saying, Solomon, this is what God has done for me. And I think he's saying it to his grandchildren that will come also. This is what God has done for me. Pay attention. Being king is no easy thing. And so, to me, I think that's very strongly seen in this, that he's shown that. So we have the king and the covenant and the promise. Thoughts?
We were able to do 20 verses.
I was hoping you were amazed by the psalm. I know you aren't. Okay, now, with all of that said, then, what we have to do with this psalm, let me get back to my notes. So, somebody tried to tell me, why does David love Jehovah? I love you, Jehovah, is how he starts. How has he shown that? How, sorry. Okay, he lives a life of obedience because he loves him, but why does he love Jehovah? Jehovah's always been there for him. Because Jehovah loves him. Right.
Verse 3. As for God, his way is perfect. The way of the Lord is tried. He is a prophet to all those who trust in him.
Okay. So, has David proved his case of why he loves Jehovah? In the most extreme circumstances that he faced in his life, with enemies that were going to drown him in darkness, in strife, God helps him. In every case, gives him the strength to overcome. Julie. Yes, I agree. And both are important aspects of what this is. Why does God love David? Is it just because he's anointed?
Because he was faithful to God.
Exactly. And we know it's not just because he was anointed, because Saul was anointed, right? And that didn't work out because Saul was not obedient at all. So I love him fervently because of what he's done for me. Why does Jehovah delight in David?
To do the praises and all the singing.
Okay, the praises and singing, but he refers specifically in that passage to the character in this part. God delighted in him. So this is a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? This is the idea of covenant. God is faithful, I'm faithful, and we're both faithful to the covenant. God is glorified, and my life is better. God takes care of me. This song obviously shows us that we'll still face trouble. That we may face trouble that we think is going to kill us. But it also shows us how to respond in those situations. How do we respond? Faithfully, trusting in God. We haven't got the obvious one. I cry out to God, and I know He hears. And hearing is a response for us. And to me, that's part of what's so powerful in this. Okay, so, other thoughts? David says, because of this, I praise and sing. Why do you praise Jehovah? Did David have reason to praise Jehovah? He's really shown it, hasn't he? Why did you praise Jehovah? Exactly. Now, I warned you last week that the concluding thought from my lesson is I'm going to ask you to do something this next week. And that is, David has written this letter. I love you fervently, Jehovah. Do this for yourself. Take the time. It doesn't have to be poetry. It doesn't have to be in prose. Okay. But I would love for you to take the time, and I'm going to try to do this myself, is try to take the time to write out why you love Jehovah. Go back and look at your life. See the things that He has done for you. Understand in those darkest moments how He was there, how He got you through them. Go through and write a love letter to God and make it clear why He loves you and you love Him. Brian?
One of the great things about this song is it's a very personal relationship with what we see between him and God. David's honest, he's open, he blesses and praises God. And I think what we need to do is look at our own relationship with God. And not on Sundays or Wednesday night. This isn't every morning, every night, lunchtime affair. Look at your personal relationship with God. How does it sit? Do we talk to God like this?
And you know what? There's a part of me that says that's probably not something we do every day. I feel like if this psalm belongs at the end of David's life, it's very much David taking that retrospective view and then how it helps his children. And I love that concept. It just fits for me. That he's trying to use this to say to his children, this is what you need to do. And if you do this, God's always going to be there for you. To me, that's incredibly powerful. Other thoughts?
Be careful what you have.
Okay. So I don't think, next week is our singing on Wednesday night. And I apologize that I couldn't give this lesson all in one thing. But it's a really long and involved psalm in some ways. And it just took me some time to get through it. So what we'll do is I'll have new lesson sheets out for week after next when we start again. Thank you for your comments and your thoughts. And, write that letter. Let's see. Song leader is Earl, and who's going to do the announcements? Earl's going to do the announcements. Thank you, Earl. And closing prayer.